Everybody. I'm Jane Susswine. I'm president of the Kaplan Center, and my pleasure to introduce our brilliant executive director, Elyssa Salama, whose idea it was for this wonderful series. So, Elyssa.
Thank you, Jane. And so I really started this series when we were just deeply, deeply in the war. And I felt like we needed something hopeful that was not the hopeful things that we've been relying on so much. And so I started looking all around to find really wonderful people who are doing interesting things with art. And Kaplan felt strongly that art was one of the great modes of communication of a civilization, and that a Judaism without art would not be anything like as rich and as fulfilling. That if we, even using his theology of a more relational divine, that being created in God's image means that we are also functionally and at the core of ourselves creators. And so I was really, really excited to run across the blessing of a number of people, but in particular, Elyssa Moss Rabinowitz's work at Kol HaOt, because they believe, as Kaplan did, so much in the importance of art as a fully accessible human experience by which we can unravel and untangle the world around us and make meaning within text, within culture, and within relationship. And so it's a really great privilege to introduce you to Elyssa, who has done something that, when she told me about it, like my head practically exploded, with the real possibility of glorious healing that can come from creating monuments in a whole bunch of different layers. So I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here with all of you this afternoon, this evening, tonight, depending on where you are. So as I said, I'm here in Jerusalem. My name is Elyssa Moss Rabinowitz. I'm, as you can hear, originally from the United States. I was born in Berkeley, California, but I've lived here most of my life. And I'm the director of Kol HaOt and one of 4 founders. Kol HaOt is an organization which is dedicated to experiencing Judaism through the arts. So Jewish texts, Jewish ideas, Jewish values. We have a beautiful gallery space here in Jerusalem. So if any of you are here, you're welcome to come visit. We have exhibits, we have performances, and we run a lot of programs for artists, for educators, workshops, both in person and online, both here in Israel and abroad. So the project that Elyssa invited me to share with you tonight, which we thought was the most appropriate given the sort of setting of this whole series, it started a little over a year ago. So at Kol HaOt, every year on Sukkot, we have a, wait, I'm suddenly getting an echo. Okay. You hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
So every year on Sukkot, we put on a big exhibit, and usually there's like some sort of like festival, and it's a very, families come and kids, and it's very joyous time. But last year, as Sukkot was approaching, so was the first anniversary of October 7th. We were still deep in the war, and as you can imagine, it was a very, very difficult time, and we felt that we can't just do what we always do, and we need something that on one hand will memorialize or give space to what had happened, and on the other and will be relevant for the time that was a year later, and that will be relevant for anyone who comes through, regardless of where they're from or what their connection is. And given that Sukkot is the time when we read the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, we chose to focus on. Is it not? Do you hear that echo?
Yeah. No, I don't hear your echo. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's a localized echo.
Okay. So we chose to focus on the very famous chapter 3, what's called the Song of Seasons, made famous by the Byrds in the 70s. For everything, turn, 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 there is a season, turn, turn. So we collaborated with another organization called HaOt Chaim, which happens to we have one word in common, the word Ot, which Ot means both letter and symbol. And this is like a totally volunteer-run initiative. HaOt Chaim means letter of life. And I'll share with you, I can share screen, right? Oh no, wait, I need, okay. So, one second. Give me a sec. So HaOt Chaim was a project that was started by some graphic designers and mostly people who do typography and font design. And they started it soon after October 7th. And their idea is that a person really is represented by their handwriting. And that if you want to memorialize a person, one very powerful way of doing that is to have their letters and literally their handwriting. And what they did is together with the families of different people who were killed either on October 7th or during the war, they took little pieces of their handwriting that the family would provide them. Sometimes it was like, in this case, from a recipe. Sometimes it was from their letter they wrote, or notes that they took in a class or in the army. And based on the handwritten letters and texts that they got, they have tons of volunteer designers who turn these handwritings into fonts on the computer that you can type with and you can download, and they're all accessible for free. So I'm just going to show you like one example. If you go onto the person's page, it tells you a little bit about, in this case, Noah. You see her handwriting, and then you see the different fonts that were made. I see in this one they even have an English font that they designed based on her handwriting, and then you can download it. So we thought this was just a fabulous project and a very meaningful way to memorialize people and to remember their imprint literally on the world. And when we met Leah, who was sort of the main woman who had started this program, I think at that point they had maybe done like around 30 or 40 people. And we asked her, like, how is it being used? And she said, different people use it in different ways, and the families, make things out of it and make posters. It's very meaningful for the families to have that. So this gave us the idea for our exhibit. And as I said, so we collaborated together with HaOt Chaim, but we wanted to focus on the chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. And I'm just going to share the text here, which I'm sure to some of you is familiar to some degree or another, but it's such a simple text. And yet to me, early on in the war, it really gave comfort. One can see it as maybe like a little, some people find it as sort of deterministic or depressing. I found it as actually very comforting, because I felt that we were experiencing so many of these things, and there's something calming to know that you're not the first person in the world going through these things, that it's part of what life is, it's part of what history is, it's part of what it is to be human in this world. So I'll just read it out loud. In English. To everything there is a season, there is an occasion for every experience under heaven. A time to birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to slay and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to discard stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to render and a time to sow, and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Now, of course, there are many, many interpretations as to what the author, it's attributed to King Solomon, was trying to say here. Is it a song of opposites, right? Are they complementary? Do they happen at different times? Do they happen at the same time? Are they consecutive? Does one lead to the other? Or are they like totally can't live together? And all that I think is a little bit up for interpretation. And you'll see as we continue how different artists interpreted those verses in different ways. So what our project was is we took these verses and we approached 14 different designers, graphic designers, and each one of them was given half a verse. You can see here the numbers of the verses. So as you see, every verse has two opposites or two sides to it, I'll say, because they're not always exactly opposite. So each artist was given one of these verses, and one of the people that HaOt Chaim commemorated in their handwriting. And their assignment was create and design a poster. We gave them certain format that will reflect your current interpretation of this verse, but will also reflect something about the person who you were given, and will somehow use their handwriting. They weren't told how they had to use the handwriting, so they didn't even all have to actually have the verse in the poster, but that was up to them. So I'm going to share with you what the results are. I think you'll see that they're very different, they're very varied, and they approach the verses in different ways. And part of the beauty of this project, I think, is the variety and diversity of how people approach them. Also, you'll note that some of the artists are more graphic designers and use a lot of imagery, and some of them came more from typography, so they play a lot with the letters, the Hebrew letters, and not as much with the imagery. So I think the best way is for me to just start sharing them. Since we're a small group, I'm gonna invite people who wanna unmute themselves to go ahead and do so if you have any questions, or if you have any, if you wanna guess what verse it is. Some of them say it on the verse, some of them don't, on the image, and some of them don't. And you'll see also how they use the handwriting is very different. So this is our first one. Anyone want to guess which verse it is? What are we seeing here? A time to. I'll give you a little more. I'll warm you all up, and then when you're ready, you can participate. So, so this one is a time to be born, a time to die. And as you can see, it's sort of like shaped like both a clock, the circle of life, the circle of nature, and we see like the time sort of alluded to. It's also the opening verses for every time, for everything there is a time, a season. And we have this sort of one very missing piece of the pie, because the statement here is that there was not enough time for this person to live. And yet it's very vibrant and very colorful, and shares a lot of the beauty of life. The next one is a time to plant and a time to uproot the planted. And this image was done by Rinat Gilboa. The woman that it represents is Savion Khan Cooper, who was a nursery school teacher on one of the kibbutzim. And Rinat chose to sort of use this imagery of planting, but also connect it to stones, which we use both as a way of memorializing and having something that sort of stays on beyond our life. This one was done by Leah Marmorstein-Yarchi. She's one of the main initiators of the HaOt Gallery project. She herself is also a graphic designer. And it's a time to kill, a time to heal. And first of all, what I think is powerful about this verse is it's not that those are necessarily what we would think of as opposites, right? The killing and the healing. And as you can see, she used this imagery of these colorful, playful children's Band-Aids that are covering up some dark bullet holes. And actually the white background is the stucco background of the infirmary of the doctor of Kibbutz Be'eri, who on the day of the October 7th ran to his infirmary to help save people and heal people. And it was there that he himself was killed. And this is the background is the actual wall of his infirmary with the bullet holes inside, but this covering it up with the healing, with the playful, with the hopeful, childlike Band-Aids. I'm going to pause here a minute to see if there are any questions so far or comments before I go on. All right. The next one is a time to destroy, a time to build. And here the artist Menachem Weinreb chose to, first of all, flip the order of the verse. As you can see, he does the destruction on the bottom and the building on the top, perhaps making a statement that sometimes you need to destroy in order to build, that the building will come from the destruction. So he's making a statement here. The name of the woman who he commemorates was Shir, so he has her name here, Shin Yud Resh, on the little flags. We see the bird in both places, both the bird of destruction, the crow, and the dove, the bird of peace. And it's, even though there's a dark side to it, it's also very hopeful. This one is very hard to identify which verse it is, but it's a time to weep, a time to laugh. And what Avital did here, the designer, first of all, the words in the middle, the white handwriting of the woman that she's commemorating who was killed at the Nova Music Festival. She wrote the words "En zman le drama," there's no time for drama, which was something that this young woman would say, like, we gotta, there's no time for drama. And so when you're dealing with the question of a time for this and a time for that, that sentence seemed to stand out for her. But the words "a time to weep" at Livkot are actually in the negative space here. I don't know if you can see it, but in the black, this is the ayin, and this is the taf, and the lamed, and the bet, and the chaf, and the vav, and the taf. So she sort of puts the crying part in the background. And the question is, where's the laughing part? Is it even in the words? Is it so hidden that we can't see it? And the whole design is like a maze because of this sort of complex navigating that we have to do between the weeping and the laughter, and find our way without any time for drama within that path. This one was done by Shana Koppel. The woman she was commemorating was also killed at the Nova Festival. And her verse was a time to mourn, a time to dance, which, first of all, until this experience, I'd never really, I don't know that you would necessarily think of dancing and mourning as the opposites or the complementary pieces. But what Shana noticed is, of course, you don't need to write the verse in her case. She just depicted the place, and this place of the Nova Festival. I don't know if any of you have actually been there since, but for us as Israelis, it at the moment now is very much symbolic both of a place to dance and of a place to mourn. It's become sort of like this huge memorial place where there are many, many ways of pictures and statues of flowers and of all the people that were at the party there. And yet it also represents the youth, the joy, the music, the festival, the place that was really joyful. And what Shana chose to write was not the verse, but the sort of theme of the party goers at the Nova Festival, which is "We shall dance again." So even though you have the sense both of the memorial and the everything that was lost, there's also the growth, and there's also the joy of the dancing. This piece by Yaniv Rotem, it's interesting. It's a little different than the rest of them, and he had a really hard verse. The verse was a time to gather stones and a time to disperse stones, cast away stones. So what he did is since his theme was stones, he thought of and as he said, we had all been to so many funerals during that period. So he talked about the function of the stones in Jewish burial. So on one hand, we have the clearing away of the stones in order to create the space for the grave. And that's what sort of this guy is doing here. And he's casting away the stones in order to create the holding place. And the Hebrew here is in sort of very traditional print font. And it's the words that are said during the burial. And here, after all that casting away, we have the Jewish tradition of putting a stone on the grave. And so here we have the young girl putting the stone on the grave, and in the handwriting is just the word Amen. This one was very important to the designer that the explanation be part of her image. So the fact that there's text here is because it was very important to her. And her verse was a time to embrace and a time to shun embraces, or in Hebrew, it's a little more literally like a time to push away or go away from the one who is embracing. And her her person was a young soldier who was 24 years old. And he left parents and a brother and also a girlfriend who they were not married, but they were in a serious relationship. And she chose to sort of depict the verse in the shape of a wreath, that these are the kind of wreaths that are put on graves, and especially on soldiers' graves, where usually here in the middle there's some sort of like who gave it, who it's from. So here she put the verse, and we have the soldier and we have his girlfriend, and what the designer Moore wanted to bring attention to is the sort of difficult place that many of these partners who are not recognized as widows find themselves in after losing the love of their life, but also not being sort of officially recognized as a widow. And actually it was very beautiful because at the opening of the exhibit, the parents of the soldier came, and the girlfriend came, and Moore, the designer, sort of presented them with this image in a frame. So that was very moving. A time to, how does it translated? A time to seek, a time to lose. So here, this one's a lot more playful. And what I love about this sort of comicsy one is just this image of the hand and the butterfly, and it's not so clear what the order is of how you're supposed to read the images. And he refers to a story which I thought was a Hasidic tale, but it turns out it's like an ancient Chinese tale, but which is where the person comes up to the old, smart, wise leader and wants to try to trick him. And he says, I have a butterfly in my hand. Is it alive or is it dead? And he thinks, I'm so sophisticated. If he says it's dead, I'll open up my hand and I'll see it's alive. And if he says it's alive, I'll crush it and it will be dead. And the wise elder says, it's in your hands, meaning the answer is in your hands, whether it will live or die. And so I think this sense of like, what are the things that we seek, we try to hold on to, but what are the things we let go of, let free, need to let go of in order to move on, is very strongly represented here in this imagery. Similar is this one. We asked one animator to do one. So this one is not a two-dimensional poster, but it's actually an animation. And he had the other side of the same verse, which was a time to keep, a time to cast away, which sounds very similar to the previous one. And the way this designer did it, Adi Ovadia, is he sort of rummaged through his bag and found what are the things that he holds, that he keeps, what are the things he holds on to, and then he put them in these little plastic bags as if they're like forensic evidence, and at the, made it sort of very stark. And at the bottom it says sort of a description of what is in the bag, how long he's had it, and at the bottom, why does he save it? And some of them are very simple things, some of them have much more meaning. Obviously all of them have meaning to him because he's chosen to hold on to them, and it sort of raises the question of what are those simple things that we hold on to and keep, and what are the things we're willing to discard or need to discard. This one is a time to rend, a time to sew. And the word rend in Hebrew is likroa, which is like also kriya, the ripping of the clothing that in Jewish tradition for when you sit Shiva. So this designer really only played with the letters. We see the verse. In the time to rend, she used letters that remind us of a Sefer Torah, or of, sort of traditional writing. And a time to mend, she used the handwriting of the person, and it's more contemporary writing, and it's all very textile based and fabricy, in order to give us the same feeling of like, what is it that we're tearing or ripping, or is being ripped away from us, and what are we sewing and building and putting back together. This is what, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but it's one of my favorites. And this one is by an artist named Dov Abramson, and his verse was, "A time to be silent, a time to speak." And even, I'm sure you all know that this sort of the red poppy, or the red anemone, is that how it's said in English? The red flowers are very representative of the Negev, and the area where everything happened. And it's a symbol, an image that we've seen many, many times, but he still had an original play on it, where he turned the petals into speech bubbles, like in comics, or like we use on our phones. And there's one or two petals missing. Also, the leaf is a speech bubble, and they're also empty. So it's sort of a commentary on one of the things I think many Israelis felt for a very long time, and maybe still feel, is that there are no words. You can't describe what has happened and what people are experiencing in words. So to sort of give that emptiness of a time to be silent, and on the other hand, a time to speak. There are things we have to speak up for, we have to fight for, we have to say, we have to remember, we have to witness. So that tension between those two comes out very strongly and clearly, I think, in this image.
I don't know how old Dove is, but for those of us who are your parents' age, that is very relevant. Reminds us of an anti-war.
Reminds of
of an anti-war poster when we were from the 60s.
Yes, yeah. I think he is referencing, he's my age, but he's referencing that as well. And his parents are American originally also. And we're now at the last one, which is a time to love. Oh no, sorry, not quite the last one. One before the end. A time to love, a time to hate. First of all, this artist designer was in reserve duty the entire time. He did it from the entire time that he had this assignment. He did it from the front. And the way he chose to do a time to love, a time to hate. So first of all, we see the love of the heart. And the part at the bottom, I think, can be interpreted both as a bullet representing the hate, but also as a, what's it called? Like I know how to say it in Hebrew, like the timer with the, where the sand time, where the time runs by. And a little bit, maybe a commentary of, out of the bullets, love will thrive, but also that it's a ticking time, and maybe we don't have enough time to have time for every season. And the final one is a time for war, a time for peace. And here too, it's just typography. It's only the words. But the time, the time for war is represented here with the darker color, with the block letters. It's very harsh. And the time for peace is intertwined within the letters of the time for war. And I think the statement of the artist here is that these aren't separate times, that even when you're in a time of war, you have to be striving for and working towards a time for peace. And perhaps maybe also the other way around, even when you're in a time for peace, you have to be preparing or be ready for a time for war. But you can see the time for peace is in white. It's in the handwriting. It's more flowy and more free. So I'm going to pause here a minute and open it up a little bit for comments and discussion before I continue. Anyone have any comments or questions? Or
Sure, I was really moved by the animated one because, you know, we do hold on to it. There's a project here. I know I don't sound like it, but I live in England. And there is a project here where people are collecting all of the little badges we've been wearing, either the yellow ribbons or the dog tags, with the idea that when all the hostages are finally home, we're going to actually have a memorial burial of them in one of the Jewish cemeteries.
mm-hmm.
So there was that piece of it, is like, what do you do? And the first ones we got here, at least, were very fragile. They weren't real made because they were made really quickly. And so I've had several iterations. So I've got like broken ones sitting on my countertops. So just, you know, how we're holding on to that. But I was also thinking of, oh dear, I'm having a blank on his name, who wrote a very short story, Israeli author, called What Have We Got in Our Pockets? He's quite famous. It will come to me. About all the things that we carry in case we might need them.
Yeah.
And how Jewish a thing that is.
Yeah. Anyone else? So one of the things that was very striking to us, we had this exhibit up. We thought it would be up for a short amount of time, and we actually kept it much longer. And then it came down eventually, but it's turned into a sort of pop-up exhibit. And just this year, actually, on October 7th, there was a school in Brussels that mounted it for their memorial. But one of the things that was most striking to me was, in addition, because we're an educational organization, in addition to just having the exhibit up and having the story, by the way, we also had like stamps of the handwriting that you could like write your own things. And there were some more sort of experiential pieces to the exhibit. But one of the things we did was we created these cards for discussion that had on one side the artwork, but on the other side questions. And what's been fascinating to me, which I guess I shouldn't be so surprised about, is just how these ancient verses are so resonant and relevant for people today, regardless of where they are in the world and what it is that they're coping with. So I'm just going to give a few options if there's someone who wants to actually answer one of the questions, or we could have some discussion. I'm happy to, but I'll share a few just to give you sort of a sense of like where the discussions could go. So a time for tearing down and a time for building up. What do you need to tear down in order to start building? What would you like to build or rebuild, and who could help you with that? What are your building blocks? What do we need to tear down these days as individuals and as a community, right? So this concept of like not looking at tearing down only as destruction that comes from outside, but also sometimes certain things need to be dismantled in order for us to create space for something new. What are those, both metaphorically and physically, in our communities and our societies? What must we tear down in order to build up? Is there anyone here who wants to answer one of these questions? share something about it.
Was there any reference to Yehuda Amichai's?
Yes, I'm saving it for the end. Definitely. Thank you,
The
Jane.
story, by the way, is Edgar Carrot.
Yeah, I was gonna say Edgar Carrot, but I wasn't 100% sure. So we also had the silence and the speaking, right? So what's the relationship between speaking and being silent? When did you feel you should be silent and why? What topics cannot be discussed in your community and why? What do we gain by that? Or what are the prices that we pay by that? By holding back and not discussing certain things or not choosing to talk about certain things.
There's makes so much sense in terms of the political situation here as well.
Right. And that's the thing, that we've had like so many different people and different groups coming through from the United States, from Australia, from Europe, from Israel, from different places. And everyone like feels like these questions and these verses are like exactly talking about their situation. How it plays out might be a little different, but you know, the same questions that we're all coping with. And that's part of what I think was was really special about this exhibit. Is on one hand, it gave us a way of remembering, but it also very much was for the current moment and not just looking backwards, but also looking forwards and giving us hope and a way and a path to move ahead. I'll give you just one more example. As we discussed, as Elyssa said before, what have you lost? What do you seek during these times from yourself, from your family, from your community? What are the things we hold on to? How is your asking or seeking changed over the last year, right? Like, what are the things that we're praying for now or that we're looking for now that we couldn't even bring ourselves to hope for 1 year ago or half a year ago? And what are the things that already we've lost, right? That are discarded or that have we've moved on from, for better or for worse. So to end, Jane, would you like to read this? I don't know if it's big enough on the screen for you to see, but what?
Person does not have time in life to have time for everything. Person doesn't have occasion for everything to have its own season. Ecclesiastes was not correct in claiming a person needs to love and hate concurrently, with the same eyes to cry and to laugh, the same hands to discard stones and to gather stones, to love in war and war in love, to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to organize and muddle, to eat and digest what a long history does over many years. A person in life does not have time. When one loses, one searches. When one finds, one forgets. When one forgets, one loves. And when one loves, one begins forgetting. And one's soul is learned, extremely professional. Only one's body remains an amateur forever. It tries and errs. It doesn't learn. It gets confused, drunk and blind in its pleasures and its pains. Always one dies like a fig in autumn, shriveled, full of oneself and sweet, the leaves drying out on the ground with bare branches already pointing to the place where to everything there is a season.
So I always feel that Yehuda Amichai thinks that he's contradicting the text of Ecclesiastes when he says Ecclesiastes was not correct in claiming so, but and for sure, I think there's a lot to be said for what he says of, you know, in our human limited life, we don't have time for everything, and we frequently have a sense of not having enough time, and also the complexity and complication of having everything all at once. And maybe Ecclesiastes was looking at history in a much broader way and sort of the ways of the world and over time. But I also think that it can be read, that the original text can be read similarly, that it's not necessarily these contradictions and opposites that each have their own season, but rather they all exist in the world. They all are there. And we as humans with short lives have to make the best of the time that we have and try to have the fullest range of experiences and building and loving and laughing and hoping, but also remembering that there are other parts and elements to life that will come our way, and to be able to remember those and embrace them as well and be in them. And that brings me back to what I said before, that there's something for me that was very comforting about this text in this time, because it feels to me that this is what it is to be human. And our ancient texts can help us express that, and our current creativity can help us find ways to connect with the ancient in a very contemporary and current way. So thank you.
Magnificent. Magnificent. Thank you so much. Does anybody have questions? I think we have remained a small group, so please do not be shy. Just unmute yourself. And
I have a story from a long time ago. I was in Israel with either a Reconstructionist or a Federation group, and with Moti Zierra. Do you know him?
Moti Zierra, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Telling the story of Yom HaZikaron, commemorating the on the kibbutz. There was a young woman who had lost a brother and recently, and was, totally devastated, but then had to set the party up for Israel and for Independence Day the next.
Mm-hmm.
Is, he introduced the Yehuda Amichai as a bridge.
Yes, and we felt that very strongly now on Simchat Torah, which is both a joyful day in our tradition, and this year with the return of the hostages was very joyous. And at the exact same time, so much pain and memory and loss that everyone was feeling very strongly. So how do we hold it all? Rachel, I don't know if you heard Rachel Goldberg's speech. Rachel Goldberg, mother of Hirsch Poland Goldberg, who was one of the hostages that was killed in captivity. She spoke on Saturday night right before the last deal, and she referenced Kohelet as well, and she said that we're being asked to feel all the feelings all at once right now. And that's what we have to deal with. So
anybody else
I'll also share that when we do the program in person, we usually have a hands-on piece where people then create their own interpretations of the verses with artwork, and show the relationship between the different sides of the verse, whether they're contradictory or they're complementary or they build on each other, or how the two different pairs of the verses work together. So beautiful things come out, but we couldn't do that on Zoom.
Magnificent. Well, thank you so much, Elyssa. You only showed me two of them, I think, when we first started talking, and I was so moved. I was, immediately on the phone to my daughter, telling her just how important it is to be able to look at detail. You don't think, oh yeah, it's my handwriting. You don't think that someday it might be memorialized, and to be memorialized in such a fundamentally moving way for us to be able to see and to learn. I'm so appreciative of the work that you've done.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share it. And of course, it's a whole team of people behind me that I'm just presenting their hard work.
Yeah. You are the genesis, shall we say, right? The wellspring of the river that began the outpouring of the beauty. So thank you. And is there a place, can we purchase the cards if we
Yeah,
don't?
you can. Oh, I did have here, wait, I ended my slideshow early. I have, let's see, where is it? Yeah, so on our website, KolHaOt.com, if you go under resources, it says Kohelet or one of those, and you'll see the project, and then there's also some of the cards and ways to, we've printed them in like sort of postcard version. And then we also have this traveling exhibit that communities can mount as like a pop-up exhibit and do both share the work and also have educational activities around it.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I already have a candidate, but we'll see if they're going to play with me. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. It was so lovely to have you. Thank you, everybody who participated. We go from the visually poetic to the oral, like with your ear poetic. Next week, we're having poetry. So I've also had a little sample of that. Very worth your while. Tell your friends.
Theme is amazing. I highly, highly recommend her.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell your friends. Come, get used to the time shift. And again, many thanks not only to you, Lisa, but also to Jane, who is one of our stalwarts, and to Sheridan, who was on earlier, who is our administrator, who does all of the things that make this possible for the Kaplan Center.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
For all of those who were confused by the time change.
Okay, good night. Bye.
Good night.